The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. The biplane shuddered under the force, trembling like a creature straining at its leash. Second Lieutenant Arthur Hawke Hensley pulled his goggles down and stared across the mist-swept airfield. Rows of canvas-winged machines sat glinting in the pale morning light, their crews scurrying around them like ants preparing for a storm. The storm, of course, was the sky itself. France, 1917. The air was thick with the smell of oil and fear. Every morning, new pilots arrived from England, their uniforms still crisp, their eyes bright with naive courage. By evening, many were gone, vanished into clouds of smoke and fire. Arthur had survived long enough to earn a name. The Hawk of Arras, they called him now. 5 confirmed kills, a medal from command, and his name whispered with reverence in the mess hall. But behind those accolades lay something darker, a truth Arthur never spoke of. Each time he downed an enemy, he saw the same thing in his dreams, a pair of eyes widening in shock, a plane spinning downward like a broken bird, the fire licking at its wings. He would wake drenched in sweat, hearing the echo of his own machine gun rattling in the silence. "Morning, Hawk." A voice broke his thoughts. Captain Merrick leaned on the wing of Arthur's Sopwith Camel, a cigarette dangling from his lips. His face was lined, not from age but from the weight of too many funerals. "Word from command, you're to lead the patrol over Cambrai. 3 planes, you, Mason, and Ferris. Spot the Hun, chase them off, and come back in one piece." Arthur nodded, strapping into his seat. "And if they don't want to chase?" Merrick's lips twitched. "Then make sure they don't come back either." Arthur gave a curt smile. Killing had become routine, mechanical, efficient. But as he throttled forward, wheels lifting from the earth, he couldn't shake the knot tightening in his chest. The sky opened before him, vast, endless, blue. It was beautiful, almost holy, but up there beauty and death were indistinguishable. They climbed through a bank of clouds, the sun flashing off the wings in blinding bursts. Mason flew to his right, grinning beneath his scarf. Ferris lagged slightly behind, his flight path wavering like a drunk stagger. Then, a flicker. Movement to the east. Arthur squinted, heart rate spiking. "Bandits, 2 o'clock high," he muttered into his speaking tube. The other pilots adjusted instantly. Silver specks glinted in the sunlight, Fokkers, 5 of them, cutting through the clouds like wolves descending on prey. Arthur's pulse quickened. He felt that familiar, electric dread, the strange exhilaration that always hit seconds before a fight. "Break formation," he shouted. The air erupted. Machine guns barked from both sides, and the tranquil blue sky shattered into chaos. Arthur dove, narrowly missing a burst that tore through the upper wing. He twisted, flipped, and lined up his target, a red-nosed Fokker barrel. Toward him. He fired. Tracer round stitched through the air, and the Fokker's engine burst into flame. The German pilot tried to pull up, but it was too late. The plane spiraled downward, trailing smoke like a dying comet. Arthur watched it fall. He always did. Another Fokker swooped behind him. Bullets ripped through his fuselage, and splinters of wood struck his cheek. Arthur jerked the stick, banking hard left, his stomach lurching as the world inverted. The enemy overshot. Arthur rolled behind him, squeezed the trigger again, and watched another aircraft disintegrate in fire. He should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt hollow. The fight lasted only minutes. When the smoke cleared, the air was silent again. Ferris was gone. Mason's plane limped beside him, holes peppering the wings. Arthur's breath trembled as he turned back toward base. Below, the battlefield stretched endlessly, trenches like scars across the earth, tiny flashes of artillery lighting the horizon. 5 kills had made him an ace. 6 made him a legend. But at what cost? He banked toward the sun, eyes stinging from the glare, and for a brief, delirious moment, imagined himself flying higher, past the clouds, past the war, past everything. Then Mason's voice crackled through the speaking tube. "We made it, Hawk. Another one for the books, eh?" Arthur didn't answer. He was staring at the smoke rising from the wreck below, where another man's story had just ended. He whispered to no one, one for the books. But in his heart, he felt the weight of every page. The mess hall smelled of whiskey and smoke. Laughter ricocheted off the tin walls, loud and reckless, the kind of laughter that only men who'd cheated death that day could manage. Arthur sat apart, his cup untouched. Across the table, Mason reenacted their dogfight with sweeping hands, his voice booming. "You should have seen Hawk. Came out of the clouds like the bloody angel of death, 2 Fockers gone before I could even blink." The others clapped and roared, pounding the table in rhythm. Someone began humming a tune, something jaunty, a parody of a hymn, and soon the room was alive with song. Arthur forced a smile, nodding when their eyes turned to him, but his mind was still up there, in the cold thin air above Cambrai, where Ferris's plane had vanished in a trail of smoke. He remembered Ferris's grin that morning. How young he'd looked, how certain that he'd come back. Arthur had promised him they'd share a drink after patrol. Now his glass sat untouched, a ghostly placeholder among the living. Captain Merrick entered, the room quieting just enough for his voice to carry. "Good work today, gentlemen. Commands pleased. 2 confirmed kills for Hensley, 1 probable for Mason." He paused, scanning the room. "We'll toast to Ferris tonight." Mugs were raised. To Ferris, they said, and for a heartbeat, the world went still. Arthur drank this time. The whiskey burned, sharp and heavy, grounding him back to earth. When the room erupted again, he slipped away. Outside, the night was cold and clean. The moon hung low over the airfield, silver light spilling across the sleeping machines. They looked peaceful like this, innocent. It was easy to forget they were instruments of death. Arthur lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his face, drawn, pale, older than his 23 years. "Can't sleep either." He turned. A woman stood by the hangar doors, wrapped in a nurse's cloak. Her hair was tied back, face smudged with soot. He recognized her from the infirmary, Margaret Wells, the one who patched bullet holes in men instead of wings. "I wasn't trying," Arthur said softly. She stepped closer, the frost crunching under her boots. "I hear them at night, you know. The engines. The ones that don't come back." Arthur exhaled smoke, watching it vanish into the dark. "I hear them too. Just not in the air." Margaret studied him. "You fly like you're trying to die." He met her gaze. "No. I fly because it's the only place I'm not already dead." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind whispered through the hangars, carrying the distant thunder of artillery. Then she said quietly, "My brother was in the infantry. Verdun. We buried what was left of him last spring." Arthur looked away. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Her tone was calm, but her eyes glimmered. "Just come back alive. That's all anyone wants here." He nodded, though the promise felt heavy. When she left, Arthur stood alone again, staring at the horizon where the dawn would soon rise. In the distance, he could see the faint glow of flares marking the front lines. Each one was a reminder. He was the Hawk of Arras. The ace. The hero. But heroes didn't wake up shaking. Heroes didn't flinch at the sound of an engine backfiring. Heroes didn't dream of falling forever through a burning sky. He crushed the cigarette beneath his boot and walked back to his quarters. On his desk, beside his flight log, lay a small photograph, his younger sister, Emily, smiling on the front porch of their home in Kent. He hadn't written in weeks. What would he even say? Still alive. Still killing. Still pretending I'm not afraid. He closed his eyes, whispering into the darkness. God, if you're up there, keep her from ever knowing what it feels like to take a life. Outside, the engines began to warm again. Dawn was coming, and with it, another day in the endless sky. The next morning broke crimson, the sky bleeding into dawn like a bad omen. The airfield was already alive with motion, mechanics shouting over roaring engines, pilots checking instruments,
officers barking orders that blurred into the hum of war.
Arthur moved among them, silent, methodical. His scarf whipped in the wind as he inspected his Sopwith Camel, his bird, as the ground crew called it. The wings were patched with canvas from 3 different aircraft, the engine still wore soot from the last fight. Every inch of it bore the scars of survival. Mason jogged up behind him, goggles perched on his forehead. Big day today, Hawk. Intel says there's a new German ace over Flanders, some hotshot with 10 kills already. Command wants you to bring him down. Arthur's jaw tightened. They want a show. Mason smirked. They want a story. The hero of Arras versus the Eagle of Flanders. Makes for good headlines. Arthur didn't reply. He'd long stopped caring about the newspapers, the glorified tales of men like him, stripped of blood and truth. Every story left out the smell of burning oil, the screaming wind, the way the sky swallowed your friends whole. He climbed into the cockpit and adjusted his gloves. Mason's voice echoed faintly as he shouted a joke to the ground crew, but Arthur barely heard it. He was listening to the engine, to the pulse of the machine beneath him. When it roared to life, it felt like a heartbeat. Moments later, the squadron took off, 3 camels rising from the field, slicing through the mist like silver blades. The clouds loomed ahead, thick and swollen, turning the horizon into a churning sea of white. As they ascended, Arthur felt the familiar calm descend over him. The world below, the mud, the death, the endless trenches, fell away. Up here, he could almost believe he was free. Until the first bullet whistled past his wing. Contact! 11 o'clock! Mason's voice crackled through the tube. Arthur banked hard, eyes narrowing as dark specks emerged from the cloud cover, Fokkers, painted black with streaks of white. And at the center of them, gleaming like a phantom, was one marked with a crimson eagle on its fuselage. The Eagle of Flanders. Arthur didn't hesitate. He dived. The 2 aces met head-on, guns blazing, the air between them shredded with lead. Arthur's round stitched across the enemy's wing, but the German pilot rolled effortlessly, vanishing into the clouds. Arthur followed. The world turned white. His breath fogged his goggles as he spun through vapor, searching, listening. The engine growled beneath him, steady and faithful. Then there. A flicker to his left. Arthur pulled hard on the stick, emerging from the cloud just as the Fokker swooped down from above. He twisted, bullets grazing his tail. The planes danced through the sky, locked in a deadly waltz, looping, diving, climbing again. Every movement was instinct. Every heartbeat a countdown. Arthur lined up the shot, 1 second, 2, then the Fokker flipped, diving toward the trenches below. Arthur followed. The ground rushed up beneath them, the battlefield a jagged scar of mud and wire. Artillery burst around them like fireworks, and through the chaos, the 2 planes weaved, hunt.
Survived. Finally, the German broke low, skimming the ground. Arthur stayed on his tail, firing in short, controlled bursts. A puff of smoke erupted from the Fokker's engine. He had him. Then the radio crackled. "Hawk, break off! You're too low." But Arthur didn't hear. He was locked in, eyes wide, pulse steady. The world had narrowed to this moment, the dance, the duel, the silent understanding between 2 men who had never met but shared the same heaven, the same hell. He fired one last burst. The Fokker's engine exploded. The German pilot ejected from the cockpit, parachuting toward the burning wreck. Arthur pulled up just in time, the shockwave rocking his plane. His breath came in gasps, his hands trembling. Above, Mason whooped through the tube. "You did it, Hawk! You bloody did it!" Arthur didn't answer. He circled once, watching the Fokker burn. Through the smoke, he thought he saw the pilot, alive, dragging himself from the wreck, his parachute tangled in wire. Their eyes met. And in that instant, Arthur felt no triumph, only a hollow ache. He saluted once, then turned his plane toward home. The sky above Flanders was red now, not with dawn, but with fire the news spread through the squadron like wildfire. By the time Arthur's wheels touched the muddy runway, mechanics were already cheering, waving caps in the air. Mason landed beside him, grinning so wide his scarf nearly fell off. "The Hawk strikes again," someone shouted. "Eagle of Flanders down!" Arthur climbed from his cockpit, his legs stiff, his heart still pounding from the flight. He forced a tired smile as Captain Merrick strode across the field, boots crunching in the frost. "Damn fine flying, Hensley," Merrick said, clapping his shoulder. "The brass will be all over this. You've done the Corps proud, son. You've made history." Arthur nodded, but the words slid off him like rain on metal. Made history. It was just another way of saying someone else died. A photographer appeared, hauling a bulky camera. "Sir, mind if we get a shot for the London papers? Hawk of Arras downs the Eagle of Flanders. Imagine that headline, eh?" Arthur hesitated. The wind whipped through his hair. Behind him, his sop with camel sat blackened at the nose, still warm from the fight. He posed anyway. The flash popped. For a heartbeat, he saw nothing but white. Later, in the mess, the celebration began. Mason poured whiskey for everyone, the air thick with laughter and the smell of victory. Someone played the piano, banging out a tune loud enough to drown the war outside. But Arthur sat apart again, staring into his drink. Margaret approached quietly, her cloak brushing the floor. "They're saying you're a hero," she said. Arthur looked up, eyes distant. "That word doesn't mean what it used to." She sat across from him. "You saved lives. That German would have killed more men if you hadn't stopped him." Arthur shook his head slowly. "He was just doing what I was told to do. I saw his face, Margaret. He wasn't a monster. He was just tired." Her voice softened. "You can't save everyone." "No," he said, "but I can remember them." The words lingered between them. Then she reached into her pocket and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "What's this?" "Something I found in the field hospital records. A letter from one of your downed enemies, written before he died. He never got to send it." Arthur hesitated, then unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, the German script flowing elegantly across the page. "Mein liebster Anna. If you are reading this, then I have gone where the sky no longer burns. I fly because it is the only place I feel close to God, but I fear even heaven has forgotten us. Still, I will look for you in the clouds. Always yours, Friedrich." Arthur's chest tightened. The name, Friedrich, echoed in his mind. The Eagle of Flanders. He folded the letter carefully, like something sacred. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The cheers from the mess faded, replaced by the low hum of engines being serviced for tomorrow's missions. Arthur sat by the hangar doors, staring at the horizon. The stars shimmered faintly through the haze, cold and distant. He thought of Friedrich. Of Ferris. Of all the men who never came back. He whispered to the empty sky, "How many ghosts make an ace?" The wind offered no answer. Behind him, Margaret's voice broke the silence. "You know, when this is over, people will tell stories about you. They'll make it sound glorious." Arthur smiled faintly. "Then they'll be lying." She stepped closer. "What will you do when it's over?" He thought for a long time. "I don't know if there's a new after for men like me." She knelt beside him, her breath warm in the chill. "Then make one." Arthur looked at her, really looked. The fatigue in her eyes matched his own, the same weariness of people who had seen too much, lost too much, and kept living anyway. For the first time in months, he felt something stir inside him, fragile, human, alive. He reached for her hand. "Maybe," he whispered, "I'll try." The orders came on a pale morning, wrapped in frost and dread. Captain Merrick stood before the squadron with a telegram in his gloved hand. His face was grim, the lines deeper than usual. "Gentlemen," he began, "this may be the last big push before winter locks us in. The Huns are massing near Cambrai. Our job is to clear the sky so our boys can advance. A hush fell. Everyone knew what that meant: heavy resistance. A meat grinder in the air. Arthur listened silently, tightening his flight jacket as Merrick continued. You'll go in pairs. Remember, watch your six, trust your wingman, and for God's sake, come back in one piece. Arthur turned to Mason, who was checking the twin Vickers guns on his camel. You ready for one more? Mason gave a tired grin. Born ready, mate. But if I don't make it back, tell the cook to name a stew after me. Arthur smirked. You'll have to name it yourself. They climbed into their cockpits as the engines roared to life. The field shook beneath them. Margaret watched from the infirmary steps, her scarf whipping in the wind. Arthur caught her eye just before he took off. She mouthed two words, "Come back." He nodded, then pulled the throttle. The world blurred into motion. The sky above Cambrai was chaos. The horizon shimmered with smoke, tracers, and the dull thump of artillery far below. Dozens of aircraft danced in the air like furious hornets, Sopwiths, Fokkers, albatrosses, spinning and climbing, firing and falling. Arthur led the charge, Mason tight on his tail. He banked sharply, diving into a cluster of enemy planes. The first burst of gunfire rattled his bones, but he lined up a shot and squeezed the trigger. The enemy's left wing split apart in a flash, spiraling into the grey below. Nice hit! Mason's voice crackled through the radio. Stay close, Arthur replied. There's more coming. They broke through a formation, narrowly avoiding collision. Arthur rolled out of a dive, only to find a German Fokker right behind him. Bullets tore past, shattering his wing struts. He jerked the stick, throwing the camel into a barrel roll, reversing their positions. A quick burst, and the Fokker exploded into flame. But the victory was hollow. For every enemy that fell, another took its place. Then Arthur saw it, painted blood red, cutting through the clouds with impossible grace. The markings were new, but the flying was unmistakable. It couldn't be. A cold shiver ran through him. The pilot looped around, guns blazing. Mason's plane took the hit. Smoke billowed from his engine. Mason! Bail out! Arthur shouted. I can't, controls are jammed. Hold on, I'm coming. Arthur dove after him, ignoring the bullets that screamed past. But Mason's plane was already descending, flames licking the wings. The last thing Arthur saw was Mason saluting him, one final, defiant gesture, before his camel vanished into the smoke below. Arthur's breath caught. His vision blurred, rage and grief boiling together. He turned toward the red aircraft, fury in his heart. They met head-on in a deadly spiral, weaving through clouds like dueling phantoms. The German pilot moved with precision, too precise, too calm. Arthur lined up a shot, but hesitation froze his finger. Through the cockpit glass, their eyes met. It was Friedrich. The same sharp features. The same pale gaze. The man he'd thought dead, the one whose letter he still carried. Arthur's world tilted. He couldn't fire. Not again. But Friedrich didn't hesitate. A burst of gunfire shattered Arthur's left wing. Smoke filled the cockpit. Arthur fought the controls, trying to steady the aircraft. He could barely breathe. Then, silence. His guns jammed. His fuel line ruptured. The camel began to fall. He thought of Mason. Of Margaret. Of the countless names that filled the skies like ghosts. Arthur leveled the plane with all his strength, forcing one last climb. His heartbeat pounded louder than the engine. The red Fokker circled above, waiting for the kill. Arthur smiled faintly, blood on his lips. Not today. He pushed the throttle forward and rammed straight into Friedrich's wing. The impact was blinding. Metal screamed. Wood splintered. Both aircraft burst into flame as they spiraled downward together, two rivals bound by fate, falling into the same sky they once ruled.